Press, please. Cameras, please. Give us space, cameras. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Members of the press, please.
Buenos días. Distinguidos jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, Excelencias, distinguidos delegados, es un gran placer para mí dar inicio a la tercera cumbre sur del Grupo de los 77 y China. Quiero darle una En su nombre, deseo felicitar al pueblo y gobierno de la República de Uganda por los excelentes preparativos realizados para la celebración y por su cálida hospitalidad. Ahora, permítame dirigirme a la cumbre en nombre de la República de Cuba, como país a cargo de la presidencia del Grupo de los 77 y China durante el año 2023. Ahora invito a Su Excelencia Solan bin Saad al-Muraji. El mío primero. Gracias. Su Excelencia Yoweri Museveni, presidente de la República de Uganda. Su Excelencia Denis Francis, presidente del 78 periodo de sesiones de la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas. Su Excelencia Antonio Guterres, secretario general de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas. Distinguidos jefes de Estado y de Gobierno y demás jefes de delegaciones. Estimados participantes, constituye un honor para nosotros participar en esta magna cita, convocada por la hermana República de Uganda. Reitero la satisfacción por estar en tierras africanas, a la que nos unen profundos lazos de hermandad y solidaridad. De nuestros ancestros africanos heredamos el espíritu de lucha y la capacidad de resistencia que caracterizan al pueblo cubano. África merece todo nuestro respeto y acompañamiento en el camino al desarrollo, por lo que los saludo con especial afecto a sus dirigentes. Reconozco en particular el liderazgo del presidente Yoweri Museveni como promotor de la paz y la estabilidad en África y a nivel internacional. Excelencias, unidad debe ser la palabra de orden para el Grupo de los 77 y China en estos tiempos difíciles, cuando proliferan las maniobras para dividir a los países del sur. Es indispensable y urgente nuestro efectivo ejercicio y acción cohesionada para cambiar el injusto orden internacional actual y librarnos definitivamente de las condiciones de absoluta desventaja en que nos sumieron siglos de colonialismo y neocolonialismo y dependencia. Si bien el año 2023 se caracterizó por sus grandes desafíos y complejos procesos, también se demostró cuánto podemos hacer si actuamos de manera decidida y concertada en defensa de nuestros legítimos intereses y aspiraciones. Gracias al esfuerzo colectivo de los miembros de nuestro grupo, fue posible avanzar en el camino hacia el lugar que merecemos y necesitamos en el contexto internacional actual. La exitosa cumbre de jefes de Estado y Gobierno del G77 y China, celebrada el pasado septiembre en La Habana, fue un encuentro tan necesario como impostergable, del cual salimos más fortalecidos. La celebración de la cumbre de líderes de nuestro grupo en el marco de la 28ª Conferencia de las Partes en los convenios en la Convención Marco de Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático, COP28, evento organizado por vez primera, crea un precedente de indudable utilidad para el trabajo futuro del Grupo de los 77 de cara a las negociaciones climáticas internacionales. El grupo fue también un actor relevante en diferentes procesos de negociación en el ámbito de Naciones Unidas, incluyendo los relativos a la Cumbre de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, y se ha insertado en los preparativos de la Cumbre del Futuro. La postura del G77 contribuyeron significativamente a la adopción del acuerdo en el marco de la Convención de Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar relativo a la Convención y el uso sostenible de la diversidad biológica marina en la zona situada fuera de la jurisdicción nacional. La participación de la presidencia cubana del G77 y China en múltiples reuniones internacionales fuera del ámbito de acción tradicional del grupo, como la Cumbre para un Nuevo Pacto Financiero Global y la Cumbre de los BRICS, contribuyó a posicionar los intereses de los países en desarrollo en estos importantes espacios. Agradecemos la participación activa y constructiva de la membresía del grupo en los eventos convocados en Cuba durante 2023, en particular las reuniones ministeriales sobre educación, cultura, turismo y medio ambiente. Esos encuentros propiciaron debates sustantivos y acuerdos sobre acciones prácticas sobre cuestiones medulares para el sur. Los convidamos a continuar trabajando de conjunto en la implementación de los 17 proyectos de cooperación diseñados bajo la presidencia cubana para el beneficio de nuestros miembros. De igual forma, debemos seguir avanzando en la revitalización del Comité de Coordinación Conjunta del G77 y los no alineados, lo que nos dará mayor coherencia y eficacia en nuestro accionar desde el sur. El hecho de que Uganda presidirá este año ambas agrupaciones contribuirá positivamente a ese objetivo. En resumen, fue un año de un esfuerzo colectivo encomiable y de resultados incuestionables que agradecemos a todos. Excelencias, estimados delegados, como contribución a este debate y para dar adecuado seguimiento a varias de las cuestiones acordadas en el grupo del G77, celebrada en La Habana en septiembre pasado, permítanme poner a consideración de las delegaciones algunas propuestas de acción práctica que, en nuestra opinión, contribuirían al logro de nuestros objetivos. 1. Presentar a la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas, antes de que concluya el año, un proyecto de resolución a nombre de los países miembros del Grupo G77 y China, convocando para septiembre de 2025 una reunión de alto nivel de la Asamblea General sobre Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación. Esa reunión debería acordar pasos prácticos para garantizar que la ciencia, la tecnología y la innovación contribuyan a acelerar los procesos en la plena aplicación de la Agenda 2030 y la Agenda de Acción de Addis Abeba. 2. Convocar para el primer semestre de 2025 una reunión de los ministros y altas autoridades de ciencia, tecnología e innovación de nuestro grupo, con vista a identificar las principales propuestas que promovería el G77 y China en la citada reunión de alto nivel de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. 3. Institucionalizar la celebración de cumbres de líderes del G77 y China en el marco de las conferencias de Estado parte en la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre Cambio Climático. Esta iniciativa, materializada por primera vez en la COP28, celebrada el pasado año en Dubái, demostró su pertinencia y valía. Facilitará la acción concertada de nuestro grupo en las futuras negociaciones climáticas. Y cuarto, realizar en la segunda mitad de 2024 una feria de ciencia, tecnología e innovación del sur para mostrar los avances de nuestros países en esta esfera, promover proyectos de investigación conjuntos y propiciar encadenamientos productivos que reduzcan la dependencia de los mercados occidentales. Este podría ser el marco propicio para trazar estrategias que revitalicen el comercio de ciencia, tecnología e innovación para el sur, como acordado en la cumbre de La Habana. Queridos amigos, para Cuba ha sido motivo de gran orgullo y honor presidir por primera vez el G77 y China. Los hemos hecho en condiciones de un criminal bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero recrudecido desde la segunda mitad de 2019 a una dimensión extrema más cruel e humana. Agradecemos profundamente la firme posición del grupo en contra de las medidas coercitivas unilaterales que se aplican contra varios de nuestros miembros, incluyendo el injusto bloqueo impuesto al pueblo cubano por más de 60 años. En nombre del pueblo y gobierno cubanos, le expresamos nuestro profundo aprecio a todos los miembros del grupo, al sistema de las Naciones Unidas y a la Secretaría del Grupo 77 por el apoyo que siempre nos brindaron durante nuestro mandato al frente del grupo. Entregamos hoy la presidencia a la hermana Uganda, conscientes del momento histórico que nos ha tocado vivir y de lo mucho que nos queda por hacer para el bienestar y desarrollo de nuestros pueblos. Podrá contar siempre Uganda con el total respaldo y apoyo de Cuba, deseándole los mayores éxitos. Cuba apostará siempre por la defensa de la unidad dentro de nuestra rica diversidad. Unidos en pos de los legítimos intereses y aspiraciones de nuestro pueblo, seremos más fuertes y nuestra voz será escuchada. Muchas gracias. Ahora invito a su excelencia, Sultán bin Saad al-Mujaray, ministro de Estado para las Relaciones Exteriores del Estado de Qatar, país anfitrión de la segunda Cumbre Sur, a dirigirse a la cumbre. El jefe de la delegación del Estado de Qatar pronunciará una declaración.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الرئيس يوري موسيفيني، أصحاب الفخامة والسمو ورؤساء الدول والحكومات، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أخاطبكم اليوم وقد مضى وقت طويل منذ اجتماعنا على مستوى القمة في الدوحة في قمة الجنوب الثانية في العام 2005، حيث صدر إعلان الدوحة الذي أكد على قيم الوحدة والتعاون والتضامن والعمل من خلال مجموعة 77 والصين لتعزيز المصالح المشتركة للدول النامية من خلال تعزيز التعاون الدولي والعمل متعدد الأطراف والتعاون بين بلدان الجنوب. الحضور الكريم، إن دولنا النامية بحاجة في الوقت الحاضر لتعزيز التعاون والعمل المشترك والتضامن من أجل مواجهة التحديات الماثلة في عالمنا اليوم التي تتطلب منا مواجهتها متحدين. وظلت دولة قطر تولي أهمية للتعاون بين بلدان الجنوب وتعزيز عمل مجموعة 77 والصين، وقد استضافت الدوحة في مارس من العام 2023 مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة الخامس لأقل البلدان نمواً، حيث تم اعتماد خطة عمل الدوحة لأقل البلدان نمواً 2022-2031، وعقد على هامش المؤتمر الاجتماعي الوزاري للتعاون بين بلدان الجنوب. وقد تبرع حضرة صاحب السمو أمير البلاد حفظه الله بمبلغ 60 مليون دولار أمريكي، يخصص 50 مليون دولار منها للمشروعات التي تعزز صمود أقل البلدان نمواً في مختلف المجالات. وتواصلت مساهمات دولة قطر الإنمائية والإنسانية والمساعدات التي تقدمها في حالات الطوارئ للدول الشقيقة والصديقة في بلدان الجنوب، حيث بلغت المساهمات المقدمة من صندوق قطر للتنمية لبلدان الجنوب أكثر من 7 مليار دولار أمريكي خلال الفترة من 2014 إلى 2021. أصحاب الفخامة والسمو، في ظل التطورات التي شهدتها المنطقة العربية منذ 7 أكتوبر 2023، يواجه الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق عدوانا غير مسبوق. وهنا نؤكد على موقف دولة قطر الداعم لحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني الغير قابل للتصرف وحقه في تقرير مصيره وإقامة دولته المستقلة على حدود 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وحصول الشعب الفلسطيني على جميع حقوقه، وهو موقف عادل يستند على احترام القانون الدولي ومبادئ ميثاق الأمم المتحدة وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة، ويتسق مع الموقف الثابت لهذه المجموعة منذ إنشائها، بل هو موقف كل الشعوب المحبة للسلام. كما ندعو للتضامن وتقديم المساعدات الإنسانية إلى المدنيين في قطاع غزة، لا سيما في المناطق الأكثر تضرراً وتأثيراً. السيدات والسادة، يصادف هذا العام 60 عام على إنشاء مجموعة 77 والصين، وقد كان للمجموع منذ إنشائها دور رائد في الدفاع عن مصالح الدول النامية في الأمم المتحدة، وحققت المجموعة نجاحات كبيرة في تعزيز التعاون بين بلدان الجنوب، ولا يزال ينتظرها الكثير. ونؤكد من جديد دعمنا لقضايا الجنوب والتي نعمل عليها بشكل جاد من خلال عضويتنا الأساسية والفاعلة في هذه المجموعة. السيد الرئيس، في الختام، ونحن نسلم راية القيادة لجمهورية أوغندا الصديقة متمنين لها التوفيق والنجاح، نؤكد مجدداً على موقف دولة قطر الداعم لدول الجنوب انطلاقاً من مبادئ التعاون والتضامن والعمل المشترك. شكراً سيد الرئيس.
Le expreso la gracia a su excelencia, señor Sultán bin Muraji, por su declaración. Invito ahora al presidente de la República de Uganda a asumir formalmente la presidencia del Grupo de los 77 y China para 2024.
His Excellency Salvador Paredes Mesa, Vice President of the Republic of Cuba and Chair of the G77 and China for the past 3 years, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, Her Excellency the Vice President of Uganda, and all other government and party leaders of Uganda, fellow Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, for the third South Summit of the Group of 77 and China. Your personal participation at this summit, which is being held 18 years after the second summit that took place in the state of Qatar in June 2005, demonstrates your commitment to the work of the G77 and China. I commend His Excellency Miguel Mario Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Republic of Cuba, for the exemplary leadership of the G77 and China in 2023. I would like to thank His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamadi Al Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar, for hosting our last summit. The group of 77 developing countries was founded in 1964 at the first session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. At the time, these countries were faced with challenges of basic development. It was the first organized effort by the developing countries to unite to steer their countries on the path of the economic development in the unjust world economic order. Building on their joint declaration at the conclusion of the first session of the UNCTAD, these 77 developing countries, at their first ministerial meeting held in Algiers, united by common aspirations, agreed to identify collective interests and to pursue their joint efforts towards economic and social development, peace, and prosperity. This unity within the group has provided it to stay on course to promote and defend its members' collective economic interests at the United Nations. We must continue to embrace the founding principles that gave life to this heterogeneous and representative group of nations. Currently, the population of G77 and China represents 80% of the global population. In addition, its GDP accounts for more than 40% of the global GDP. This shows that in spite of the challenges, the group has registered progress in defending and promoting the interests of the developing countries. Uganda welcomed the theme of the third South Summit of the G77 and China. We meet at the time where the developing countries continue to face multiple global challenges that undermine our national and collective efforts to achieve sustainable development and our national development aspirations. We are now past halfway for the 2030. Unfortunately, the overall progress in the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, as agreed at the heads of states and government and high representatives meeting held at the United Nations in September 2015, falls short of the expectations, with the developing countries lagging far behind. Therefore, this summit is an appropriate forum to speak with a common voice as leaders of the Group of 77 and China on the urgent need for effective actions to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development during the remaining 7 years to realize our vision, shared principles and commitments, particularly the eradication of poverty in all its forms and dimensions, and the pledge that no one will be left behind. Excellencies, setting the path toward the realization of leaving no one behind requires that as a group we remain united in our demand to the international community to support developing countries to urgently address the global challenges, in particular poverty, hunger, digital divide, and climate change. We continue to witness the threat to multilateralism and the rise of unilateralism, which makes all susceptible to the impact of the current unjust international economic order. At the Group of 77 and China, we should continue to work collectively to ensure that we achieve an international economic order that is just and equitable as envisaged 59 years ago at the founding of the group. Uganda remains committed to the pledge to leave no one behind. In this context, Uganda has accelerated its national efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in its entirety. We firmly believe that accelerating our progress towards the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda is critical to our national aspirations to ensure that no one is left behind, particularly during this time when we strive to build back better from the COVID pandemic and respond to other global challenges. Uganda has identified 4 key sectors of wealth creation and job creation that include commercial agriculture, industrialization, the development and modernization of services, and information and communication technology to support our socio-economic transformation. The government of Uganda is implementing targeted interventions in the above key sectors with a view to ensure that no one is left behind. In addition, we are equally prioritizing the promotion and protection of the human rights, including the right to development, in line with our national legal framework and international commitments. We wish to emphasize that the issue of human rights should be handled objectively and not politicized. South-South cooperation continues to play a critical role in supporting development countries in their efforts to achieve self-reliance. In this regard, I commend all developing countries for their contributions in strengthening this element of international cooperation. As countries in the Global South, we need to uphold this solidarity, which is a pillar in helping us safeguard our collective interests. We need to strengthen trade and investments among our countries. Therefore, the African Continental Free Trade Area, CFTA, leads the way to strengthen intra-trade among African countries to ensure prosperity for the African people. As developing countries, we should support the implementation of these regional trade blocs. We must also support strengthening triangular cooperation. leaving no one behind cannot be realized without adequately addressing the challenges and needs faced by countries in special situations, in particular African countries, least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, as well as specific challenges faced by many middle-income countries, conflict and post-conflict countries, and countries and peoples living under foreign occupation. These challenges continue to undermine the efforts of these countries to ensure that no one is left behind. In this regard, we support the call for the international community to provide targeted support to enable these countries to address their challenges. We also support the urgent reform of the international financial architecture to ensure that it is fit for purpose to respond to the financing needs of the developing countries. In our view, the international financial institutions and multilateral development banks must support the national priorities of developing countries without any conditionalities that infringe on these countries' sovereignty. Uganda is taking over the chairmanship of the group at an opportune time when we celebrate our 60th anniversary. I thank you all for entrusting Uganda with the chairing of the Group of 77 and China for 2024. We commend the African group for endorsing our candidature for the chairmanship of the Group of 77 and China. 60 years of the existence will continue after 59 years of our group's existence to yearn for a revitalized multilateral system which is capable of adequately addressing current and emerging global challenges. We firmly believe that multilateralism remains a fundamental and crucial mechanism for addressing our common challenges together as nations in solidarity. Uganda's chairmanship will strive to further promote acceleration of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, scaling up action to address climate change and biodiversity loss, strengthening international tax cooperation, financing for development, fight against illicit financial flows, and strengthening digital cooperation among others. This year, 2024, is a crucial year with various intergovernmental processes at the United Nations on issues that are of paramount importance for the group. These include the inter alia, Fourth International Conference for the Small Island Developing States, Third UN Conference on the Landlocked Developing Countries, ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, Forum for Financing for Development Follow-up, ECOSOC, Economic Social Council High Political Forum on Sustainable Development, the Summit of the Future, Fourth International Conference on the Financing for Development, and 2024 UN Climate Change Conference, all of which demand that we at the group remain even more steadfast in promoting the interests of developing countries. Uganda, therefore, commits itself to consolidate the unity, to work for the consolidation of the unity, presence, and influence of the group in these intergovernmental processes. In this regard, we look forward to working closely together with all the members of the group in this endeavor. In conclusion, it is critical that the Group of 77 and China remains united in its pursuit of collective interests at the United Nations. In the intergovernmental processes at the United Nations, we must ensure that priorities of the group are promoted and defended. I assure you that our team, led by the permanent representative in New York, has my full support to chair the Group of 77 and China. It is our sincere hope that our chairmanship will be an invaluable new step to the path toward the realization of our aspirations as developing countries. I thank you. Thank you so much. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, to address us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, Mr. Yoweri Rugata Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda and Chairman of the Group of 77 and China. Your Excellency, Mr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Republic of Cuba. Their Excellencies, the Heads of State and Government. Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished ministers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I feel both honored and privileged to address this august convocation on behalf of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Let me begin by conveying my sincere appreciation to His Excellency President Museveni and to the government of Uganda for hosting this third South Summit, a momentous event highlighting the unshakable commitment of the G77 and China to advancing multilateralism and global cooperation as the centerpiece for achieving the noble goals of the United Nations. Uganda's assumption of the chairmanship coincides with the group's 60th anniversary. I have no doubt that with such capable leadership, Uganda will confidently carry forth the torch of leadership for a prosperous, united, and stronger South. I should also like to recognize and commend the outgoing dynamic chair, Cuba, for its extraordinary and insightful leadership of the group during these trying times of geopolitical tensions and multifaceted challenges. Excellencies, our world is confronted by a confluence of crises, from the lingering impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to rising inflation, from a worsening crisis of debt distress to the harsh realities of climate change, which for many, especially the most vulnerable, is a real existential threat. In parallel, escalating geopolitical tensions, wars, and conflicts have risen to the fore, shattering the lives of millions and putting the safety and security of the entire planet at risk. At the forefront of these is the harrowing humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip. Generations of families suffering irreparable trauma and loss, children undergoing amputations without anesthesia, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble in one fell swoop. With half the population facing starvation and tens of thousands dead in just over 100 days, the world is looking to the United Nations for answers. The General Assembly has not sat idly in the face of this crisis. It has been both active and ambitious, often led by this very group of member states. It has demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire for all parties to comply with their obligations under international law and for the immediate release of all hostages and humanitarian access. I assure you that I shall not tire of reiterating these urgent demands, and I will do so for as long as it takes. I count on the collective leadership of this group to do the same. In tandem, we are witnessing mounting frustration with and the complete rejection of an unjust world order which continuously relegates the interests of the Global South to the margins of the international community's list of priorities. Now more than ever, the G77 and all nations must come together and build bridges of dialogue, hope, and cooperation to create a more fair, more just, and more prosperous world for all. Your presence here today as leaders of the Global South underscores the fact that the Group of 77 and China, as the largest and most diverse group in the United Nations, has a pivotal role to play in shaping a new world order that is more inclusive and leaves no one and no country behind. While our challenges today are profound and perverse, the reality is that we have been struggling for quite some time. Several developing countries had already veered off course in their pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals, even prior to the pandemic and the extant conflicts we see today. Not surprisingly, the most vulnerable of our societies have borne the brunt of these adverse external events, with countless pushed back into hunger and poverty. And environmental emergencies, including climate change, have only grown in severity and impact year on year without robust and adequate climate action for course correction. Against this backdrop, our cherished multilateral system, the policy apparatus for problem-solving international cooperation, is facing an acute crisis, with legitimate questions of current relevance and credibility arising and intensifying time and again. Purposeful dialogue, solidarity, and cooperation are in retreat, clearing an opportunistic path for divisive forces that breathe paralysis and disaffection. We are quite literally at a fork in the road. We must therefore seize the opportunity of summits such as this to rededicate ourselves to the core values and principles that remain as relevant and compelling today as they ever were. Multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and the international financial institutions, must undergo urgent and radical reform to better recognize and leverage the significance of the Global South. We need an international financial system rooted in inclusion and equity, inspiring and bolstering the full commitment to multilateralism, fostering SDG-aligned investments, and breaking the vicious cycle of debt and interest compounding for developing countries. We must harness the full power and opportunities of South-South and triangular cooperation, not per se to supplant our relations with the North, but rather to rebalance them and thereby magnify the global resonance of the stubborn unity and solidarity of the South. We all know that the G77 and China is no stranger to strife and perseverance, precisely because it was founded on a robust solidarity with the aim of furthering the principles of multilateralism. A majority of the G77 members have shared histories of colonialism, struggles of liberation, struggles for liberation, equality, and the pursuit of independence. Along with the lasting legacy of resilience, these are the cornerstones to the unity that historically binds the G77. And these must continue to be embraced as the group's collective strength in the face of the enormous risks and threats ahead. As President of the General Assembly, I am committed to these very priorities and principles: solidarity, cooperation, inclusion, and not forgetting support for the most vulnerable, so that we remain faithful to our own dictum of leaving no one behind. This new year offers an opportunity to shift our collective trajectory and to make common cause in our determination to craft a new narrative that incentivizes and supports effective global transformation in bringing those left out, overlooked, and perhaps even forgotten into the mainstream of sustainable development. A series of pivotal events on the UN Sustainable Development calendar are noteworthy. First is the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States in Antigua and Barbuda. Secondly, the 3rd United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries in Rwanda. And thirdly, the first ever UN General Assembly Sustainability Week, a flagship initiative of my presidency, being convened from the 15th to the 19th of April 2024 at UN headquarters, focusing on sustainability themes in selected sectors, namely tourism, transport, energy, infrastructure, as well as a signature event on debt sustainability, which of course is a major concern to members of the G77. Sustainability Week will build on the 2023 SDG Summit and seek to accelerate our path to 2030 in order to achieve the promise of the SDGs as well as that of the Paris Agreement. I am confident I can count on the constructive engagement of the G77 and China at the highest possible level to ensure that this week amply positions us to take forward what will unarguably be the defining multilateral process of our generation, that of the Summit of the Future. The Summit aspires, among other things, to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda, to rectify key governance gaps, and to ensure member states uphold their commitments to development. The G77 and China must play a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the summit, insofar as it will recalibrate the relationship between the global north and the south. In that regard, the application of modern technology to support human welfare will be a key area of focus, and so the G77 will need to be alert to ensure that such technologies contribute to closing as distinct from increasing the development gap. I also encourage your continued engagement in the intergovernmental negotiations for the Declaration on Future Generations and the Global Digital Compact, the potential economic benefits of which are extraordinary, though with probable social and societal risks. How we balance the benefits versus the costs is a critical issue for contemplation by the G77 and China. I call upon you all to actively support impactful transformation, a transformation that goes beyond statistics and annual reports, one that instead translates into tangible human and developmental progress, that creates a more secure, safe, and peaceful world and a more sustainable planet. Despite the challenges, I am certain that together we can seize this moment to unlock new commitments and adopt innovative policies that leave no one behind. Excellencies, together as one G77 and China, let us commit at this summit to work even harder to rebuild trust, to reignite global solidarity, and to harness the power and potential of multilateralism to secure and deliver peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for everyone, everywhere. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the 78th Session of the United Nations General Assembly, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Your Excellency, President Museveni, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is a pleasure to join you for this very important summit. I thank the government of Uganda for its hospitality and congratulate it on the leadership of the G77 plus China. 60 years ago, recognizing the need for unity and solidarity in the face of common challenges, the G77 was born. Over the decades, you have been an engine for South-South cooperation and development, lifted millions of people out of poverty, and provided a powerful voice for developing countries on the global stage. Today, you are the largest grouping of the Global South, representing 80% of the world's population. And your solidarity and partnership are essential to building a sustainable, peaceful, and just world for all. A world in which the United Nations Charter, international law, and human rights prevail in global relations. Excellencies, halfway to the 2030 deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals, far from leaving no one behind, we are leaving half the world behind. Progress on poverty and hunger is stalling, and in some countries going into reverse. Many G77 members are grappling with an economic hangover from the COVID-19 pandemic, crippling debts, a cost of living crisis, and sky borrowing costs. Hundreds of millions of people around the world, particularly women and girls, are living without the most basic respect for their human rights, and the lack of jobs is generating enormous frustration among young people. Climate disasters, most of you did little to create, are knocking chunks out of your economies and increasing people's suffering. Investment in sustainable development and climate action is slipping further out of reach. And while South-South cooperation is strong and deepening, it does not replace the need for the respect of the commitment of the Global North, for sustained engagement to reduce poverty and inequality, support growth, and build resilience in developing countries. Digital technologies have enormous potential for good, but they are also inflaming inequalities. The International Monetary Fund warns that artificial intelligence could make things even worse. And peace, the foundation of sustainable development, is breaking down amidst a climate of global impunity. Around the world, from Sudan to Ukraine, the Middle East and beyond, wars are devastating lives, fueling mass movements of people, disrupting global supply chains, and threatening to set entire regions alight. In Gaza, Israel's military operations have spread massive destruction and killed civilians on a scale unprecedented during my time as Secretary General, including more than 150 members of our own staff, following the horrific terror attacks by Hamas on 7 October. This is heartbreaking and utterly unacceptable. The Middle East is a tinderbox. We must do all we can to prevent conflict igniting across the region. And that starts with an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to relieve the suffering in Gaza, allow humanitarian aid to reach everyone in need, and facilitate the release of hostages, which should be immediate and unconditional. The repeated refusal yesterday to accept the two-state solutions for Israeli and Palestinians is totally unacceptable, as I told the summit of the non-aligned movement. The denial of the right to statehood for the Palestinian people would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security, exacerbate polarization, and embolden extremists everywhere. Excellencies, righting our troubled world depends on effective global action. Yet the international system is out of date, out of time, and out of step, reflecting a bygone age when many of your countries were still colonized. The United Nations Security Council is paralyzed by geopolitical divisions, and its composition does not reflect the reality of today's world. It must be reformed. And the global financial system, including the Bretton Woods institutions, have failed to provide a global safety net for developing countries in distress, as it was created after the Second World War in a totally different global economic situation. Yet, amidst all this gloom, there is hope. Last year, the SDG Summit issued a strong political declaration thanks in large part to the advocacy and tenacity of G77 countries. And this year, we have an opportunity to build on that success. The Summit of the Future, to be held in New York in September, is a generational opportunity. It aims to reform and revitalize multilateralism so that it works for everyone, everywhere, and meets the challenges of today. It is a chance to create the conditions for countries to achieve the SDGs, to find consensus on frameworks to address new challenges, and to build a better world for us all. We rely on the G77+China to make the Summit of the Future a success, to seize this opportunity and to find common solutions. The Summit will consider deep reforms of the international financial architecture. Financial institutions and frameworks created after the Second World War still largely correspond to the power relations and the global economy of that time. They must be reformed so that they are truly universal, reflect with justice the realities of today, and are much more responsive to the needs of developing countries. I have also proposed an SDG stimulus of $500 billion a year in affordable long-term finance for sustainable development and climate action in developing countries. And multilateral development banks must be adequately capitalized and must change their business models to leverage far more private finance for developing countries at reasonable costs. The SDG stimulus calls for urgent action on debt, including breathing space for countries facing unbearable repayment schedules. And it calls for the expansion of the contingency financing for countries in need, including through the rechanneling of special drawing rights. Momentum is building. All countries backed these proposals in the SDG Summit last year, but now we must turn them into reality. So, Excellencies, beyond the Summit of the Future, I ask you to unite against climate catastrophe. The very existence of some countries in this room depends on limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius in line with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in light of different national circumstances. I urge you to hold developed countries to account for climate justice and for leading an equitable and just transition based on the phase-out of fossil fuels and massive investment in renewable energy. All financial commitments must be met. Clarifying the delivery of the $100 billion and doubling adaptation finance by 2025 are only starting points. The Loss and Damage Fund is a step forward and a testament to the power of the Global South, but we must call for meaningful contributions that have not yet been announced. And we must also advocate for an ambitious new finance goal for the future at COP29. And we must not forget that the just and equitable energy transition includes producing and trading critical minerals in a way that is fair, sustainable, and provides maximum benefit to developing countries. They must be more than simple exporters of raw materials. Excellencies, new technologies can turbocharge progress towards the SDGs. Our proposed Global Digital Compact aims to ensure that in a new technological era, no one is left behind. And I hope it will be agreed at the Summit of the Future. And the high-level body on artificial intelligence that I created, which includes several experts from G77 countries, and is balanced 50% North and 50% South, has already made preliminary recommendations on global artificial intelligence governance, including with the objective of accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals. The new Scientific Advisory Board is also working to ensure scientific breakthroughs are shared equally for the benefit of all. And I praise the efforts done by the Presidency of Cuba to put science and technology in the center of G77 concerns. I encourage you to engage in all these efforts. The 21st century cannot replicate the vast inequalities of the 20s. Do not let new rules for new technologies be written by the rich for the rich. Excellencies, let us face it, those that benefit most from the present global governance system are unlikely to lead its reform. So momentum for change must come from you. I urge you to keep driving these efforts forward. We have a chance to cultivate a just, peaceful and prosperous future where no one is left behind. But for that, a lot needs to be changed and reformed. Together, let's unite to fight to make it a reality, and I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Liu Guozhen, Special Representative of the President of China, member of the Political Bureau of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee, and Vice Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, as a special guest.
尊敬的穆塞维尼总统，尊敬的古特雷斯秘书长，尊敬的各位国家元首、政府首脑、国际组织负责人、女士们、先生们，很高兴作为习近平主席的特别代表，出席本届南方首脑会议。祝贺乌干达担任主席国，感谢他们做出的周到安排，感谢古巴此前做出的贡献。我发言的主题是 联合自强，踔厉奋发，共同谱写南方合作新篇章。今年是77国集团成立60周年。60年来，南方国家正是通过这样的机制，走出一条平等互信、互利共赢、团结互助的人间正道。今天的77国集团已有130多个成员国，囊括2/3以上的联合国会员国，成为国际事务中不容忽视的重要力量，成就值得骄傲，经验弥足珍贵。独立自主是南方国家的政治底色。大多数南方国家是从殖民主义历史泥淖中走出来的，勇于维护国家独立和民族尊严，不懈探索适合自身的发展道路。我们从不屈服于外来干涉，努力捍卫生存权、发展权，坚决反对霸权主义和强权政治，把国家发展和民族命运掌握在自己手中，在风云变幻的国际局势中站稳了脚跟，并且促进了人类社会的整体进步。联合自强是南方国家的光荣传统。习近平主席指出，南合作是发展中国家联合自强的伟大创举。我们不断深化南合作，推进南北对话，在国际事务中站在一起，抱成一团。77国集团和中国是我们在联合国框架内的重要合作机制。南方国家还创设金砖机制、非洲联盟等平台，发出共同声音，捍卫共同利益。前不久，金砖机制实现历史性扩员，强化了新兴市场和发展中国家团结合作的势头，鼓舞了全球南方携手前进的士气。发展振兴是南方国家的历史使命。南方国家抓住经济全球化契机，推动贸易和投资自由化、便利化，推进双边、区域和多边合作，实现了经济社会较快发展。当前，南方国家已占全球经济版图半壁江山，占世界贸易总量的42%，占高技术产品出口的1半，同发达国家差距显著缩小。据国际机构测算，南方国家对世界经济增长的贡献率已接近60%。公道正义是南方国家的共同诉求。我们坚持从事情本身的是非曲直出发，在重大国际问题上说公道话、办公道事。我们在联合国、20国集团、国际货币基金组织、世界银行等机制中发挥建设性作用，推动建立亚投行、新开发银行、丝路基金等支持发展中国家发展的金融机构，引领国际合作潮流，推动全球治理体系朝着更加公正合理的方向发展。女士们、先生们，世界百年变局正加速演进，南方国家集体崛起势不可挡。同时，不公正、不合理的国际经济政治旧秩序影响犹存，阻碍世界和平与发展的因素尚未根本消除。南方国家面临 越来越复杂的外部环境，我们要重整行装再出发，推动构建团结、平等、均衡、普惠的全球发展伙伴关系，推动构建人类命运共同体。我愿就此提出3点建议：一是勇于探索现代化道路，现代化是世界各国的共同追求，而实现现代化没有放之四海皆准的模式。我们要坚持以人民为中心，立足本国国情和传统，吸收借鉴其他文明成果，探索符合自身发展要求的现代化途径。要把握新一轮科技革命和产业变革机遇，推动经济社会跨越式发展。中国正以中国式现代化全面推进民族复兴，我们期待同广大南方国家一道，共同实现现代化，不让任何一个国家掉队。二是推动更高水平的南南合作。南方国家的发展阶段和水平各不相同，资源禀赋丰富多彩，经济结构具有很大的互补性。我们要联合自强，促进发展战略对接，持续激发合作潜力，提高南方国家的整体竞争力。中方愿以务实合作和能力建设为重点，在更大范围、更宽领域开展与南方各国合作，共同挖掘增长潜能，破解发展难题，增进人民福祉。三是积极参与全球治理体系改革，顺应各国，尤其是发展中国家的普遍要求，切实提升其代表性和话语权，是破除全球治理积弊的关键。我们要共同倡导平等有序的世界多极化和普惠包容的经济全球化，建设开放型经济，坚定促进贸易和投资自由化便利化，坚决反对逆全球化、泛安全化，营造有利于南方国家发展的国际环境。要共同支持世界贸易组织和国际金融体系改革，提升国际发展机构支持南方国家的实效。要推动将发展议题置于国际经济政策框架的核心位置，敦促发达国家切实履行官方发展援助和气候融资的承诺，加快落实联合国2030年可持续发展议程。贫困是南方国家首要的发展挑战。中方支持联合国秘书长减贫特使，设立联合国秘书长减贫特使，促进全球减贫事业。女士们、先生们，中国坚定支持南方国家实现共同发展。新中国成立之初，我们就在力所能及范围内向其他国家提供援助。70多年来，我们实施了数千个成套和物资项目，开展了上万个技术合作项目，为发展中国家提供40多万人次的培训。我们从不附加政治条件，从不干涉别国内政，赢得了南方国家的深厚友谊。近年来，习近平主席先后提出“一带一路”倡议、全球发展倡议、全球安全倡议、全球文明倡议，旨在于促进 人类社会共同发展、长治久安、文明互鉴，推动世界走向和平、安全、繁荣、进步的光明前景。共建“一带一路”10年来，形成了3000多个合作项目，拉动上万亿美元投资。全球发展倡议8大重点合作领域，搭建起10多个国际合作平台，200多个合作项目开花结果。中国同近20个国际组织开展合作，在近60个国家实施130多个3方合作项目，涉及减贫、粮食安全、公共卫生、气候变化等多个领域，超过3000万人受益，为落实2030年议程提供了助力。习近平主席强调，中国作为发展中国家、全球南方的一员，始终同其他发展中国家同呼吸、共命运。中方将继续把南南合作作为对外合作优先方向，同77国集团成员站在一起、干在一起，以中国式现代化的发展理念和发展成果，为南方国家共同发展贡献力量。谢谢大家。
I want to thank His Excellency Liu Guozhong for his statement. And this brings us to the end of the opening session. We are now going for a group photograph. And when we come back, the press are declared undesirable, and they should not be here. We should be only the conference people. I thank you. Let's continue to the next program.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, honorary heads of delegation, honorary heads of states and heads of delegation will be exiting through the front door. The rest of us should remain seated. And as His Excellency announced, when we return, it will be a closed session. The media and observers will stay out, but will advise observers and invited guests when they return. Thank you.